Alright, so this is going to be part 1 to what if Tanjiro was in Black Clover. So with that being said, let's just roll the intro.
Bow in the presence of greatness. 'Cause right now that has forsaken us. You should be honored by my lateness. That I would even show up to this fake shit. So go ahead, go nuts, go.
Alright, so before the story actually starts, I gotta explain some background information for this story to make sense. Not only that, but I'm also gonna get into some light spoilers into Demon Slayer, and it's mostly gonna be including characters' deaths and things like that. So not too much, but if you don't want to be spoiled, I suggest reading the manga. It's already completed. And yeah, with that being said, let's actually get into it. Now, for this to actually make sense, we're going to go off a fan theory that's going around in the, I guess, Black Clover community. It isn't new, but it has been there for quite a bit, and it has to do with the character Yami. Now, Yami comes from a country called the Land of the Sun, and the theory goes like this. It's so inspired by Japan, and Yami himself is also so inspired by Japan, and no one around him has known about the Land of the Sun or even heard of it. So people think that Yami was actually from the real life Japan and then transported within the Black Clover universe. Now, this is a common genre within Japanese media, such as anime, light novels, manga, that being isekai. If you are an anime fan, you probably heard of it, and if you're a really big anime fan, you probably know that it's oversaturated within the market. That being said, this is a fan theory. This is something that is not confirmed or anything, but it's something that the community really likes. So for this story to make sense, we're going to go off the idea that Yami himself came from Japan, or real life Japan, but then transported into the Black Clover universe. This explains why no one's ever heard of it and why his language is completely different and things like that. Not only that, but there hasn't been a character from the Land of the Sun other than Yami. So let's go with that. So now on to the Demon Slayer part of the video when it comes to explaining the background, I guess. So Demon Slayer starts off in the Taisho era. So this is the time between 1912 to 1926. So 13 years before World War II, if that gives you a general idea of the timeline. Now, this is going to take place at the end of the manga, so maybe a year or two after that. So this is going to be Tanjiro at his peak, or around the end game, if you will. So this is going to be a Tanjiro that is 2 years after the ending, so he's going to be around the age of 19 years old. And the year that I'm going to put on this is going to be 1924. The reason why I do that is for the following. Now, this is going to be a time in where Tanjiro and basically the group from Demon Slayer, that being Inosuke, Zenitsu, and Nezuko, are actually flying around Tokyo to different parts to basically honor the dead that actually fell during the attack against Muzan in the manga. Now, I say that because a lot of the pillars that had died, a lot of their hometowns are somewhere within different parts of Tokyo, because Tokyo itself isn't one city, but it's kind of like a bunch of different city-states, I guess. I hope I'm not offending anyone with that, but I think that's how it is. But yeah, so Tanjiro and his group are basically just going to different parts of Tokyo, and the way that they're moving between each city is they're actually taking a commercial flight. Now, you might be saying, well, that doesn't make sense given the time, but it actually does. So the first commercial flight within Japan was actually in 1922. So this is 2 years after that, and this is going to be 1924. This would also mean that Tanjiro was born in 1903. So this is just my timeline. There isn't a confirmed date in when Tanjiro was born, but this is what we're going with. So at this point, Tanjiro is 19 years old, and he's flying around Japan. Now, during one of these flights, there's actually a big storm, and this causes the plane to actually crash, and Tanjiro and his group blacks out. When Tanjiro awakes, he's on this beach, and he looks around, and the area is nothing like Japan. It's a lot different. Now, Tanjiro is in his demon slaying gear, and the reason for that is because he wanted to put it on as a sign of honor for those who had fallen. So he still has his katana as well as his outfit from the series, or Nichiren blade. but sorry if I butchered that. I'm bad at different languages. But anyways, so Tanjiro would look around and this area is completely different. Because remember, Tanjiro comes from an island and Black Clover is more Western based. So all the areas that's around is more based off of Western fantasy than it is different parts of the world. So as Tanjiro would look around, he would think that he's in some other country, but he wouldn't be able to wrap his mind around it as he knew he crashed, but there's no one around him and there's no wreckage and there's no one around him. So he continues to walk forward and he eventually sees more of the landscape. He thinks that this could be Europe or some other country in that area, as he's seen about it in books and different media, but he doesn't know how he could get there if he was flying around Japan and specifically Tokyo. Now, he doesn't have much time before someone approaches him. Because of the way that he's dressed and everything like that, he tries to talk to Tanjiro about it. As the man speaks to Tanjiro, he just doesn't understand what he's saying. He understands that it's not English or anything like that. It's not a language he's ever heard of. And it's obviously not Japanese, and the person in front of him doesn't look Japanese either. Like I said before, it's more Western based. And yeah, Tanjiro tries to communicate with the man, and the man is confused. He doesn't know what he's saying. So Tanjiro tries to write something in the sand using his sheath of his sword. He writes out a few different words in kanji, and the person is still confused. Then Tanjiro tries to write some words in English, but obviously his English isn't really that good, as he wasn't really formally trained or learned it from anyone, just some things that he picked up here and there. Now the person is still confused, so he tries to take him within the nearest city to see if he can actually understand anyone. He makes a gesture for Tanjiro to follow him, and he does. Once they go into the middle of the town, it seems to be very crowded, as it's actually a pretty popular place. Not only that, but there's a lot of people rushing between them. Now actually, Tanjiro loses the man between the different people going around in this crowd, and he tries to get back and find him, but he actually bumps into people and causes an entire scene, and someone actually gets hostile. Now Tanjiro doesn't want to fight and starts talking to the person trying to calm him down, but this only causes them to get more angry. This is when they bring out the grimoire and starts to shoot spells at Tanjiro. Tanjiro is super confused at what's happening. He just saw someone open a book and he started to blast him, and it seemed like it was coming out of nowhere. He doesn't think it's a breathing type, and he's never seen anything like it, so he can only assume that it's some sort of magic. As the crowd starts to dissipate, this is when some local magic knights actually come and contain the incident. So the man would give him his report, and Tanjiro would try to, but obviously the communication wouldn't be there, and Tanjiro would be sent to jail for causing an incident. In there, they would try to basically talk to him, but alas, that wouldn't work. Eventually, this is when the Wizard King would come, as Tanjiro would be thought of as a spy of a different country. So the Wizard King would actually come with his assistant Marks to see if they could go into his mind and check if there's any secrets. They do so, and there is nothing to link him to any other country. So again, Tanjiro tries to speak with the Wizard King, and the Wizard King is a little bit confused, but he thinks he's heard this before. As Tanjiro continues to speak, Julius demands Marks to use his own memory magic on him so that he could show Tanjiro a memory. This is when Tanjiro actually sees a memory of the Wizard King looking at one of Yami's writings, because Yami is from Japan, or the land of the sun. Now Tanjiro would interpret this as an older style of writing, as obviously language evolves over time, including writing. And if you guys don't understand what I'm getting at, basically the Wizard King actually taught Yami their language and their way of writing. So he would have seen how Yami would write down his language to translate it to their language. Not only that, but I would say that Yami is from a different time than Tanjiro, probably older, and that's why he's not surprised by their world being less developed. Because if he was from a different time, like a more closer to Tanjiro, then he would be surprised at the lack of, innovation within the Black Clover universe in terms of technology. With Tanjiro showing excitement on his face, the Wizard King concludes that this person must be from the same place as Yami, so he calls out Yami to basically handle the situation. Yami does come by some hours later, and he talks to Tanjiro within his native language. Tanjiro asks Yami where he is, like what country it is, and how come people are able to use some sort of magic from books. Now Yami explains that this is the Clover Kingdom, and he asks Tanjiro if he's from the Land of the Sun. Tanjiro's like, the Land of the Sun? You mean Japan? And then he shows his earrings, as his earrings do represent the flag of Japan. That's when Yami says, Japan? I've never heard of a place called Japan. Is that what they call it now? And this is when Tanjiro puts it together. He's from an older period, because the Land of the Sun is something that they would call Japan back then, or something equivalent to that. And then this is when Yami basically explains how their world works. Essentially, when you become 15, you get a grimoire and a grimoire tower, and you unlock your magic. Now Tanjiro has never heard of this or anything like that. He tells Yami that he's from the Taisho era. Now Yami never heard of this, so he tells him in a more direct way. He tells him that he comes from a timeline or a time that is way more advanced than it is now, and he tells him that the date was 1924. Not only that, but he was in an airplane with his friends and family. He tries to explain the concept of it, but it's lost on Yami, thinking that it's some sort of magic, but Tanjiro assures him that it wasn't, that in fact, magic didn't really exist where he came from, or not the same way that it is in Black Clover. After they have their conversations talking about each other's lives and everything like that, Yami then tells the guards watching him that he'll take responsibility for him and that he'll take him into his squad, essentially. But first, Tanjiro needs to get his grimoire, so they go to a grimoire tower, and Yami takes him through a portal that Finro had created. Tanjiro's surprised that this could even happen, but he goes along with Yami. There at the tower, he gets his grimoire, even though he's not a citizen. Now, I don't know if I'll give him a 4-leaf or a 3-leaf, you guys can tell me down below, but let's just say that his magic type is breathing magic. Now, what this actually does is something quite unique, or at least I think so. So within Demon Slayer, there is this debate whether or not the effects that you see within the different breathing styles are true or not. Because there's a lot of evidence that say that they aren't, while there's a lot of evidence that says that it is. For some, it makes sense, like wind and moon, but for others, like fire and water, it doesn't really make too much sense, as nothing really gets burned and nothing really gets wet either. So, for this magic style, it's going to give them the different styles, but they're actually going to have their effects. So, fire is actually going to be fire, and water is actually water, and things like that. And if you read the series in Demon Slayer, you know that Tanjiro knows quite a different styles. Yami would look at Tanjiro's grimoire and his magic, and he would ask Tanjiro what type of magic is that, as he's never seen it before. Tanjiro says, well, where I come from, there are different breath styles originating from the breath of the sun, and they use that technique to fight demons, hence this outfit and my unique sword. So Yami says, so there's demons where you come from? I don't remember that when I was in the Land of the Sun. And Tanjiro says, yes, but they're all gone now since we took down Muzan. After hearing this story, Yami then smokes a bit and then exhales. He tells Tanjiro, well, you better learn how to use that grimoire fast because you're going to be on my squad. Now Tanjiro then says, squad, what do you mean? And Yami explains the system with the Magic Knights and how they are meant to protect the people of the country. So Tanjiro was all up for that since, he wants to protect people, especially those that are weak and defenseless. So Tanjiro agrees. Then Yami says, also it pays very well since you don't have a job and you're a foreigner just like me. So Tanjiro would train for a bit, learning how to sense magic and control his different styles using the mana around him. Now, it's a little bit different since he still needs to breathe, but since he has mana, it's going to enhance all of his physical attributes as well as the different breath styles that he has, given that they have actual effects now corresponding to their element. Now, let's get into the timeline. So let's say that Tanjiro actually gets into the Black Clover universe around the same time as Asta getting his grimoire. So we would have that time to spend on training as well as Asta getting better with his grimoire. Now Asta doesn't really have any changes, so we're not going to really talk about his story just yet. So we would actually get to the day of the Magic Knights entry ceremony. Now obviously Yuno and Asta would have to basically compete and test out their skills to get into the Magic Knights. So that's not really going to be any different. The only difference here is that Yami actually does take someone with him other than the two that he normally takes. So in canon, he takes Gordon and Finral. This is because obviously Finral can teleport them there, and I'm not sure why Gordon's there. I think it's because he's a high-ranking member compared to the others, so he's a senior member. Anyways, so they would take Tanjiro there as Yami's really fond of him, not only because he is a swordsman just like him, but he's also from the same country, at least they think so, as there are some discrepancies here and there, but they're pretty much similar. Now, Tanjiro seeing this would see all the different types of magic, and he himself actually is pretty well versed in his magic. Now, he sees Asta and he sees that he has this giant sword, and he is rather unpolished when it comes to different sword techniques. Although he does have a different type of sword, so obviously the different techniques would be drastically different than what Tanjiro's used to, since he has a katana-like blade, while Asta has like a great sword. After a while, this is when Tanjiro would ask Yami a question. He would say, "Captain Yami, is it possible for a person to be born without magic?" And Yami would say, "Well, I'm not sure. I've never heard of a case, but I don't think so. I don't think it'd be possible." And this is where Tanjiro would point at Asta. He would say, "What about him? He seems not to have any magic at all, yet he could summon these swords, and they seem to repel magic." And this is when Yami says, "Yes, I've been looking at him for a while. He seems interesting, but his power is so unknown. I don't think he'll be chosen this year." Tanjiro would try to convince Captain Yami to recruit him. He would tell him that throughout his life he's been fighting with characters that have unique and unknown powers, and they were always the best allies. Doing this, Tanjiro would remember the different pillars and their unique oddities, as well as the friends that he hasn't seen in quite some time, Onosuke and Zenitsu, not to mention his sister, as well as a special someone that I won't say for now, as it's a bit of a spoiler for those who haven't read the manga, and I want to keep that to a minimum. Anyways, so Captain Yami says, "Well, if you think he really is up to it, then I guess we could take him." I think he would be more persuaded, as not only is his member of his squad telling him to get Asta, but also he could tell that Asta is very determined, just based off his, personality and how he's interacting with everyone, and as well as him just screaming out loud that he's going to be the Wizard King. So when Asta's up to see who will actually choose him, the only person to raise their hand is Yami. Now everyone there looks at Yami and questions his judgment, especially Fragolion and Jack. They see nothing really special about this kid, and they don't really know what his power is to begin with. It's only until Yami just blows out smoke from his cigarette and says, "Well, Tanjiro, I hope you're right about this kid." And then obviously Asta's very excited to join. He meets up with Tanjiro and he shakes his hand. Tanjiro gives him a warm smile, saying that he's going to look forward to them fighting alongside each other. Alright, so before I end it, I'm going to go over the stuff that happened in between the time skip between Tanjiro actually getting his grimoire and his training. So obviously Tanjiro would learn pretty fast, as he's a fast learner both in breath style and technique, so it would make sense that he would grasp the idea of mana pretty easily due to his breathing techniques and everything like that. So he would progress really fast, Not only that, but I think him being someone that's more proactive than reactive, he would actually gain stars for the Black Bulls. So at the beginning of the series, when Asta joins, they had around -30, and I think that would be lowered by around half. So I think at this point they would have around -13 stars, which actually is a big improvement since, well, he would have to get around 17 stars to boost that up. So that's pretty impressive for Tanjiro. Not only that, but both Tanjiro and Asta are pretty similar characters in the sense that both of them are kind and want to help others. But I think while Tanjiro is more kind, I think Asta is more inspirational. But both of them are characters that inspire others, but not to the same effect, and they do it in different ways. So I think people in the Black Bulls would still try harder than they usually do, but not to the same extent that they would have if Asta was there. So yeah, let's go over his stats, I suppose, for his, different stats that you have in Black Clover. So in physical strength, I think he would have a 5 out of 5, and that's due to the fact that he was already pretty strong in his own series, especially at the beginning, as he was able to break, I believe it was Genya's arm just by grasping it. So he has an amazing grip strength. Not only that, but obviously he gets stronger as he progresses the series, and he also knows how to reinforce his muscles due to the breathing technique that Zenitsu uses. So he's able to become faster and everything like that by basically enhancing his muscles with oxygen, so it makes sense that way. So other than that, his magic amount, he probably have either a 4 or 5 in this. I don't want to make him too OP, but obviously I think he would have a great amount of magic due to his basically having more, I guess, life force. And I want to connect it to the end of the manga and what happened there with the fight against who, but I don't want to say too much, obviously. But I think that gave a factor in his life force. Other than that, his magic control probably wouldn't be too good. I think it would be around 3 or 4, and then his magic sensing would probably be a 3. His cleverness would probably be a 4, since he wasn't like educated in the formal way, I guess you could say, but he is pretty smart when it comes to fighting. Now, with that being said, this is gonna be the end of the video. But before that actually happens, we gotta say thanks to the patrons over on Patreon. So if you want to join them, it'll be linked in the description, or you can go to patreon.com/ComicSansTheMan. There you can get my videos early, or you have a chance to get a drawing from me. It only takes $1 to do so, and it supports the channel in different ways. So, like I said before, it'll be linked in the description. I hope you guys liked the video, and let's give a thanks to the patrons. So, as always, in our gold tier, we have Nippy Director, Kenny, Dwayne Fenn, and Lyco. If you want to join them, link will be in the description. And with that being said, this is going to be the video. So, yeah.